The driveway was already crowded when I pulled up, the glow from Kenna's windows spilling onto the street like a stage light. Cars lined both sides, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifting through the autumn air. I carried the quilt in both hands, careful not to crease the stitches. Each panel told a story, scraps from Kenna's childhood dresses, an apron from the cafe's opening week, even a square from her college sweatshirt. It had taken me months to finish. Every thread pulled with memory. Inside, the house buzzed with energy. Investors from the cafe stood near the kitchen island, craft cocktails balanced in their hands. A pair of Instagram personalities hovered by the floral arrangements, snapping photos of themselves instead of the flowers. Kenna was at the center, dressed in a sleek black jumpsuit, her hair pinned back like she belonged on a billboard. When she saw me, she waved, her smile too broad, too bright. "Mom's here," she announced, turning toward the crowd. "And she's brought a surprise?" The room shifted toward me. I held out the quilt, unfolding the top so the colors showed in the lamplight. "I made this for you," I said quietly, "a record of where you've been." For a moment, silence. Then Kenna tilted her head, let out a laugh that felt rehearsed. "Oh, Mom, you and your projects." She held the quilt aloft like a game show prize. "Look, everyone my mom thinks we need more nostalgia clutter." A ripple of chuckles ran through the room. My chest tightened, but I kept my smile. Drew reached for her elbow as if to intervene, but she brushed him off with a flourish. Kenna carried the quilt to the kitchen trash can and dropped it inside. "We don't need your junk," she declared. The laughter grew louder this time, some guests clapping at her performance. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall. Instead, I reached for a glass of water on the counter, lifted it as though I were simply another guest enjoying the evening. I even managed to smile when one of the influencers patted my shoulder, whispering, "She's just teasing." No, she wasn't. I stepped onto the porch, the mountain air cool against my face. My hand shook only once as I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. One word was all it took. Typed and sent to Marta, execute. Behind me, the laughter rose again, muffled by the glass door. I squared my shoulders, slid the phone back into my purse, and prepared for the morning that would follow. After my husband died, the Brevard cottage felt like an empty shell. The quiet no longer comforted me. It pressed against my ribs, demanding to be filled. Kenna had come up from Asheville that spring, all fire and conviction. She stood in the kitchen, waving her arms as if her dream of a cafe already stood solid on the corner of Haywood Road. "Mom, it's perfect timing," she said. "If you sell the cottage, you can finally move closer to us, and I'll have the seed money I need." I wanted to believe her. She was my only child. Ambitious, clever, restless. So I signed the deed over, let the cottage go, and gave her $190,000 money Harold and I had saved with discipline and patience. We agreed it was an investment, not a gift. Marta insisted on drawing up the papers, a promissory note secured by a deed of trust, plus a UCC1 lien on the shiny espresso machine and floral cooler. Kenna insisted were non-negotiable. For the house she and Drew bought, my stake was written in as a protective measure. For the cafe, I was granted 30% membership. Minority, but real, Kenna signed. Though her smile faltered as she did. "It feels like you don't trust me," she whispered that night when we boxed up the first of the cottage dishes. I told her trust wasn't the issue. Prudence was. Still, I saw the way she looked at the folder Marta prepared, as though it were a leash around her ankle. In the years that followed, the cafe became her stage. She dressed it in succulents and Edison bulbs, plastered its name across social feeds, and drew in young professionals who wanted both cappuccinos and curated flowers. Whenever someone praised her for being self-made, she let the compliment land without correction. When I asked for quarterly reports, she sighed. Mom, you don't have to hover. It's not like you're really involved. I kept silent more often than not. Silence was easier than being accused of control. But as I watched her toss that quilt into the garbage, the irony of it settled heavy. If you're accused of controlling the people you protect, is the real control the contract they never bothered to read by the next morning? The echo of Kenna's laughter still throbbed in my ears. I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, listening to the muted thumps of Ivy and Milo racing upstairs. The house smelled of last night's hors d'oeuvres, wilting lilies, and spilled wine. Kenna moved briskly between sink and counter. Her tone clipped whenever she spoke. At 9 sharp, a knock rattled the front door. Drew opened it, expecting a neighbor, but instead a courier in a navy jacket held out an envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Pike," he said. Drew hesitated, but Kenna stepped forward, tore the flap open, and skimmed the first lines. Her cheeks blanched. "What is this?" she snapped. I remained seated. "A demand letter. You've missed conditions. The note is accelerated unless cured." Drew's voice rose. "You blindsided us at our own home across the street." Mrs. Albright from next door paused with her recycling bin, watching as if the whole exchange were theater staged for the block. 2 other neighbors lingered on their porches, pretending to water plants. Kenna tried to smile, but the edges of her mouth quivered. Before the shock settled, her phone chimed. She glanced at the screen, and I saw Quentin Laird's name. She answered on speaker, forgetting caution. "Mrs. Pike," his steady banker's voice said. "We've received notice that Miss Whitlow has revoked her guarantee effective immediately, unless additional collateral is pledged by Tuesday. Mountain Laurel Bank will consider remedies under your loan covenants." Kenna ended the call without reply. For the first time in years, her posture sagged, as though the air had left her lungs. I rose, pressing a hand to the table for balance. "Kenna," I said softly, "this isn't a performance anymore. Let's talk." But not with the children listening. From upstairs came Ivy's laughter, followed by Milo calling for breakfast. Drew muttered something about overreach, but Kenna lifted a hand to silence him. For once, her eyes didn't burn with defiance, they flickered with something closer to fear. "Fine," she whispered. "After the kids go outside, what costs more, the money you borrowed, or the respect you failed to budget for?" The children clattered out the back door with their bikes, Drew trailing behind them with a forced grin. When the screen door slapped shut, the house fell into a brittle silence. I stayed at the kitchen table, my cane propped against the chair, while Kenna leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her jaw tight. "You can't just sick lawyers and bankers on me," she said. "It's my business, my life. It's also my money," I answered evenly. "And my name on documents you signed. You agreed to quarterly reports, no undisclosed debt, and no conduct that damages the brand we built. Every one of those covenants has been breached." Her eyes flashed. "That quilt stunt was just another example. You parade your sacrifices like trophies. It was a symbol of control. Mom, you had to show everyone you were still holding the strings." I took a breath, steadying the tremor in my hands. It wasn't control. It was memory, a record of hours you won't get back. So is every ledger. Kenna. That's why they matter. She flinched, though she tried to cover it with a laugh. "You always talk about ledgers, as if love has to be accounted for in columns." "No," I said, leaning forward. "But responsibility does. And last night you burned more than fabric when you threw that quilt away. You burned the last of my silence." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where trust used to live. Finally, she straightened, her face hardening. "You want to play hardball. Fine, but don't expect me to grovel. This is still my house, my cafe, my name on the door. I gathered my purse, rising slowly, and my security tied to both. Remember that. If apology is cheaper than default, why do some people insist on paying in pride? By Monday morning, the cafe hummed with its usual rush, steam hissing from the espresso machine, customers chatting over laptops and muffins. I sat at a corner table with Marta, the demand letter between us, while Kenna paced the polished concrete floor. Marta's tone was calm but firm. Here are the cure conditions. You'll accept a general manager with authority over day-to-day operations. You'll issue a public correction, an acknowledgement that your comments toward your investor were inappropriate and damaging to the brand. And you'll provide complete financials for the past 2 quarters. Kenna let out a sharp laugh. A public correction. You want me to post some humiliating apology on Instagram? That's not branding. That's suicide. It's contractual, Marta replied, tapping the papers. The operating agreement allows us to require remedial steps if a member injures company goodwill. Your performance at the party qualified? Kenna rolled her eyes. But within an hour, she had drafted a polished, post-smiling photo, artful filter, caption about misunderstandings and family passion. It read more like marketing copy than contrition. Marta scrolled through it, lips tightening. This won't do. It doesn't meet the spirit of the clause. And besides, there's another problem. Kenna froze. What problem? Marta slid a document across the table. Drew signed a merchant cash advance 3 weeks ago. $25,000. Daily withdrawals. Filed as a junior lien. I watched the color drain from Kenna's face. She turned on Drew, who had been standing near the register pretending to check invoices. You did what he muttered. We needed liquidity. It was just to bridge payroll. I didn't think it mattered. It matters, Marta said. That MCA is a direct breach of your loan covenants. And because Ms. Whitlow filed her UCC-1 first, her lien has priority. The bank has already flagged the breach. They will call the line unless this is unwound immediately. Kenna pressed her palms against the counter, shoulders trembling. You're boxing me in, she whispered. No, Marta answered, her voice cool. You boxed yourself in. We're offering a way out. When a lifeline comes with conditions, do you grab it or bite the hand and drown? By midweek, the first cracks widened into chasms. The flour wholesaler who had supplied Kenna since opening refused to release shipments without cash up front. Too many bounced drafts, the manager told her flatly. The produce supplier followed suit. What had once been a bustling cafe with dependable lines of credit now ran on daily improvisation. The merchant cash advance made matters worse. Every morning, the lender's software swept the cafe's account, yanking several $100s before Kenna sold her first latte. By noon, payroll coverage was uncertain. Drew snapped at staff, promising everything would be fixed, while Kenna snapped at him. Customers noticed, the hum of the cafe thinning as regulars slipped out earlier than usual. Marta and I moved quickly. She filed for a temporary restraining order in Buncombe County Court. And by Friday, we had one no equipment could be repossessed or removed from the premises. My lien, recorded years earlier, gave me priority, and the judge recognized it. For now, the espresso machine, the coolers, and the ovens were safe. But safety on paper didn't ease the weight in the air. That evening, back at my bungalow, Ivy curled up beside me on the sofa, her small hand tracing the lines on mine. Grandma, she asked suddenly, was the quilt ugly? The question landed with more force than any lawsuit. I swallowed before answering. No, sweetheart, it wasn't ugly. It was stitched from favorite days, your mother's dresses, her old apron, little pieces of where we came from. Her brow furrowed. Then why did she throw it away? I brushed her hair back. Sometimes grown-ups confuse memory with burden, but one day, you'll see what it really meant. She nodded, thoughtful in a way children shouldn't have to be, and leaned against me until her breathing slowed. I sat there long after she drifted to sleep, the house quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Outside, the streetlights pooled on the pavement, casting shadows I knew by heart. I thought of the cafe, of Kenna's frantic pacing, of Drew's excuses. They were losing control, but clinging to pride as if it could steady the floor beneath them. If saving the house means changing the person who lives in it, do you save the structure or the stubbornness? Tuesday began with a heavy gray sky, the kind that pressed low over Asheville and made every sound sharper. Marta and I walked up the courthouse steps just after 9, her briefcase swinging at her side. Inside, she filed the petition for receivership and the notice of acceleration with a calm efficiency that only sharpened the knot in my chest. By 10, the clerk's stamps were drying on the documents. At the same hour across town, Kenna had gathered her staff in the cafe, setting her phone against a row of stacked mugs. She announced she would clear the air with a live broadcast. I knew this because Marta's paralegal streamed the feed to her tablet as we sat in the courthouse lobby. Kenna started well enough, her tone syrupy. She spoke of miscommunications and family tensions that had been misunderstood. Staff shifted uneasily in the background, their eyes darting between her and the screen. But then her smile thinned, and the words sharpened. "Frankly," she said, looking directly into the camera, "my mother has meddled from the beginning. She hides behind contracts and pretends it's support. Everyone saw the quilt stunt proof she cares more about appearances than progress." The room behind her went silent. Even through a screen, I felt the slap of it. Marta didn't flinch. She only tapped her phone, sending a single-word text. "Proceed," minutes later, while Kenna was still live. The cafe door opened. A process server in a dark suit stepped inside, asked for her by name, and when she refused to stop filming, he taped the notices directly onto the glass front door: petition for receivership, notice of acceleration. Copies were handed to her in full view of staff and customers who had wandered in mid-speech. The live stream captured everything: the shuffle of papers, the shock on her face, the whispers rising among employees, and the muffled laughter of 2 women who had also been guests at Saturday's party. Kenna's voice faltered, then rose shrill. "This is harassment. She's trying to ruin me." But the camera betrayed her. The audience saw not a wronged entrepreneur, but a cornered figure unraveling in real time. I sat in the courthouse lobby, the paralegal's tablet propped on the table, and listened to her words dissolve into static as comments flooded the live chat. Each one a mirror she could not escape. When the microphone becomes a mirror, are you ready to see yourself in the recording? The courtroom was smaller than I expected, paneled in pale wood that smelled faintly of polish. Marta guided me to the petitioner's table, her calm presence steadying me while Kenna and Drew sat stiffly across the aisle. Kenna wore a navy blazer, her hair slicked back into a knot so severe it seemed to stretch her face taut. She didn't look at me, only at the judge who entered moments later and called the hearing to order. Marta rose first. Her voice was measured, deliberate. She laid out the breaches one by one, the merchant cash advance signed without disclosure, the missed financial reports, the covenant violations with the bank, and finally, the public disparagement caught on video. She introduced the clips from Kenna's live stream, the notice filings, and the TRO we'd already secured. Each document was marked, each violation pinned neatly to the record. When it was Kenna's turn, her attorney tried to paint me as manipulative, a mother who resented her daughter's independence. He called my actions punitive, but the judge's gaze was cool as she held up the signed operating agreement. "These are your signatures," she said. These obligations were clear. Whether you like them now is irrelevant. Kenna's composure cracked. She insisted she'd been provoked, that the quilt was a joke, that I had conspired with Marta to corner her. The judge cut her off with a raised hand. This court is not concerned with family quarrels. We are concerned with enforceable agreements, and by every measure, you are in breach. The ruling came quickly. The judge granted temporary receivership for 60 days, appointing an independent manager to oversee the cafe. My filings were upheld, and Kenna was barred from transferring or liquidating any assets. The MCA was frozen pending review, and the bank was authorized to require additional collateral. As the gavel struck, a murmur rippled through the gallery. 2 vendors I recognized leaned toward each other, nodding. One caught my eye and gave the slightest incline of his head, a gesture of acknowledgement. They would side with me now, not Kenna. Kenna slumped back into her chair, her face a mask of disbelief. Drew whispering furiously at her ear. For me, it wasn't triumph so much as confirmation of the protections Harold and I had built, of the contracts Marta had drawn, of the choice I made to act when silence would have been easier. If the law is simply a map, why do some people insist the terrain should move for them? The weeks under receivership were strangely quiet. The cafe no longer throbbed with Kenna's frantic energy or Drew's empty reassurances. The new manager trimmed the menu, closed the Pack Square kiosk, and put every invoice on cash terms. Vendors returned once they saw payments clearing again. Slowly, the hum of customers came back, steady instead of erratic, a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Kenna avoided me at first, slipping into the cafe after hours to count the till or fuss with flower displays. But one evening, she came to my bungalow alone. She stood in the doorway like a girl again, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I thought you wanted to take it all from me," she said quietly. "But maybe you just wanted me to stop pretending I could do it alone." I motioned her inside. We sat across from each other at my worn oak table, the same one where she once did homework. Her voice broke as she admitted the truth, how envy had soured her gratitude, how she couldn't stand that I still held a part of her story she couldn't rewrite. I listened, then told her what mercy looked like: therapy to untangle pride from identity, financial coaching to learn what numbers meant beyond appearances, and a real apology. Not a post, not a performance, but words spoken at the table with staff and family alike. She nodded, though tears slipped down her face. And for the first time in years, she didn't wipe them away like they were weakness. Later that week, Ivy and Milo helped me hang a salvaged quilt panel on my living room wall. They pressed the fabric flat while I hammered the frame in place. Kenna stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching silently. I saw something soften in her eyes as her children laughed, proud to see the square of memory displayed where it belonged. If dignity is non-negotiable, what parts of love can still be bargained for? 2 months later, the cafe garden filled with long tables and mismatched chairs. The air carried the scent of herbs and coffee, and neighbors brought casseroles and pies as if the place had always belonged to them. The receiver was stepping down that week, his work finished, and the staff buzzed with relief at the steadiness he left behind. Kenna stood before the group, her voice trembling but clear. She spoke of mistakes, of pride that had clouded her judgment, and of the people who had carried the cafe when she could not. There was no filter, no flourish, just her words laid bare. For the first time in years, I believed her. When she finished, I rose with a folded bundle in my hands, not the old quilt, but a remade wall hanging, stitched from the squares I had salvaged. "This is for the cafe," I said, "for the people who kept it alive." The room grew still. Kenna stepped forward, eyes wet. and asked softly, "May I hang it?" I nodded, and together we lifted it onto the garden wall. Fabric catching the last light of day. When your worth is finally accounted for, who gets a seat at your table, and who has to earn their way back in?